My name is Rudina Vincent, and I am the founder of DIFEST. We are honored to co host this wonderful webinar on leveraging employee resource groups to create connection and community during challenging times with NAAAP's ERG Leadership Council. Over the next 55 minutes, we will address actionable insights on how your ERGs are driving D&I momentum, positive effects on business priorities, and much more. Without taking up your time, I'd begin by introducing you to our moderator and NAAP's board member, the founder and CEO of DISA Global Leadership, Tanya DISA. Tanya is a global leadership trainer. She draws intercultural experiences from her traveling to over 80 countries, living, studying, and working in Australia, Japan, Hungary, Spain, China, and Switzerland. She is a professionally trained coach and holds an international MBA from ISAC Business School in Spain and Peking University in China. Tanya has thrived in corporate sales and marketing management roles within the healthcare industry in companies such as Pfizer, GlaxoSmithKline, Medtronic, Ecolab, Johnson & Johnson, and led strategic discussions at the World Health Organization in Switzerland. Tanya has been named one of the top 100 diversity executives by Diversity MBA. Therefore, everyone, please put your virtual claps together for our moderator for the day, Tanya Tisa.
Thank you so much, Rudna. Thank you, DIFEST, for I like that, DIFEST, for your partnership and for everyone coming together globally for this webinar. If we could go back one slide, Ben. We have an incredible panel for you here today. And the topic on the table is leveraging employee resource groups to create connection and community during COVID-19. And let's expand that to the turbulent times we are living in right now. So we really just want to take a moment to honor the fact that you have created time in your busy day, your busy life to join us. We want to create psychological safety and a really welcoming virtual space where we can dive into the topics that matter most to you. And so we're really hoping that this will be interactive. Please feel free to add in any burning questions that you have into our chat box. Take the time to introduce yourself. And that's in fact what we're going to do right now. So we've got an incredible team of diversity and inclusion leaders from all across North America here to share their stories, their advice, their wisdom, and their brilliance with you today. We've got Stephanie Redivo from SAP, Mabel Huang from Airbnb, and Buck Dossie from Adobe. So let's kick it off. If we can go to the next slide. I quickly want to introduce myself to you via some of the values I live and work by. So as Rudinath mentioned, diversity and inclusion is very close to my heart because often when I was in my corporate career, I was the only female and very often the only underrepresented minority in most of the teams that I worked in. And from my own journey of surviving, but learning and wishing there was a way to thrive, I really became an entrepreneur. It's on a new mission to inspire women and underrepresented minorities to find their voice and visibility so that we are all feeling more connected and engaged. And we're seeing more diversity at executive levels of our organizations. One of the trends that we're hearing right across the board, no matter what country you're in, what city you're in, or what environment that you're working in, is we're really moving to a more virtual environment, probably because we've been thrown into it as a result of COVID-19. But what's encouraging to see is how we're coming together as a community and how we're continuing to move forward as employee resource group communities and as leaders in this space. Personally, I'm a travel junkie. Love the adventure that comes with traveling and all the growth and connection and speaking to different types of people. And I'm so honored to have been on the board of directors for NAAAP, North American Association of Asian Professionals, for the last 5 years. And I think we're going on our third or fourth year now of our founding our Employee Resource Group Leadership Council. So I know many of you are dialing in today as part of our ERG Leadership Council, where we meet on a quarterly basis to dive into awesome ERG. So one other housekeeping tip I want to mention, if you've just joined us, please remember to mute yourself so we can really hear from the panelists. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie, who's going to introduce herself and share a little bit about the ERG landscape at SAP.
Great. Thanks so much, Tanya and Rudolph. This is really exciting times, especially with our ERGs, and also a very heavy time. So yes, my name is Stephanie Redivo. I go by she, her, and hers. I want to take a moment just to acknowledge that I have the privilege to live, work, and play on the traditional unceded territory of our Coast Salish people. I want to pay my respects to elders, both past and present, who have been custodians of this land. I live in Vancouver, BC. I've been at SAP for almost 19 years, 5 years or so in our Global Diversity and Inclusion Office, and I have the sort of the privilege and honor to do this work every day. If you take a brief sort of look at my history, I started off as a support engineer and then moved into sort of a variety of kind of training and external training, internal roles, which as most people sometimes happens, you land into project management and program management. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. I know if people can go on mute, but I understand sometimes. And then, so like I said, last 5 years working as a senior director in our inclusive culture focus area. And so in our Global Diversity and Inclusion Office, I work with our ERGs, and I'll get into that kind of in the next slide. A little interesting fact about me, I truly am obsessed with making the perfect chocolate chip cookie because I feel like a warm chocolate chip cookie just reminds me of being a little kid and having that at home. And so I try to make it in anything from temperature to baking soda, baking powder, flour. So ridiculous if you want to talk to me about that. And so much so wanted to do, I went on a journey of a 30-day cookie challenge where, yes, I made a new cookie every day for 30 days and documented it and gave diversity and inclusion tips because sometimes these topics are quite heavy and people feel they're not sure where to go. And so I shared a few of those tips. I love running. I've already said baking. You can see sort of the pictures on the right, and sort of that bottom right is the cookies, part of the cookies I made. That middle picture is not a stuffy. He is my dog Pico, short for Piccolo. He's a mini golden doodle who runs the household for sure. And the picture of me at the top is when I had an opportunity to talk about the power of inclusive leadership last year. My favorite quote really is, if you can be anything in this world, be kind. It's just so important because we know sometimes we go to places of judgment and whatnot. And I find I go to places of judgment typically when I'm hungry or tired, very much self-aware. And so, yeah, if we can go to the next slide then. Thank you. So let's talk about our ERG lab. Oh, if we can go back. Oh, thank you. And I will also say, I may sometimes say ENGs for Employee Network Group, just so everyone's aware. So our landscape, big global goal, we want SAP to be the most inclusive software company on the planet for sure. And our ERG mission, right, is to constantly create that culture of inclusion and a workplace that supports diversity. I think our ERGs are the ones that they're the backbone of our employees. They're that safe space to go to. And so, and I listed out sort of all of our our ERGs. I put global in front of the ones so you can see which ones are global and which ones are regional. And we have various chapters. Now, from sort of a framework perspective, we have our Global Diversity and Inclusion Office, which provides the funding courses. So a few years ago, we worked very hard to put, training material together around like how to start an ERG, how to get an executive sponsor, what does that look like? And so it helps people to figure out if they're wanting to start an ERG, how do you go about doing that? How do you get an executive sponsor? And what is the role of the executive sponsor as well as the chapter lead? And all of them are at different maturity. I hope you're able to hear me okay. I know I still hear some background noise. So that's a high level. Shall I hand it back to you, Tanya, or shall I hand it over to Mabel? Mabel, maybe I think
Mabel, we'll hand it to you. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thanks, Tanya. It's definitely really good to hear about, you know, the ERG landscape from you know, ooh.
Yeah, sorry. MPA Dassery, can you please mute? Thank you so much. And our host is going to try to mute everyone and just unmute the speaker. Thank you so much.
Thanks all. So great to hear from, you know, like as our Asian Employee Resource lead, global lead, it's so good to hear from other kind of D&I spaces, D&I reps in the house today, for me to get a better sense to know, you know, from an ERG perspective, like how can we best advocate for ourselves, and how do we work with our executive sponsors and other ERG groups? So I am so happy to be a part of the conversation today. My name is Mabel, and is it okay if we switch slides? Thank you. I almost need the slides to like prompt me. I should be able to prompt the slide, huh? I wanted to start off by talking about my journey kind of growing up as a proud American-born Chinese, based in Oakland, California. And, you know, growing up in a very diverse place, which I'm very proud of, still felt like to a large extent, about my identity and who I am, who I stand for, my place in society. What is my value add? Like, I can't really speak great English. I also couldn't really speak great Chinese. So it was like, well, I felt like it was a lose-lose situation growing up. Needless to say, I don't feel that way anymore. Phew. The power of knowledge and education really, like, you know, this class I took in college called The Voice, and how we could all have agency to take back the ownership of our stories and voice, and that really speaks true to who we are as fluid people with different cultures and backgrounds, that we can totally voice in a way that's authentic to us. And so that, you know, the college, and then going through the years, and then going on my Fulbright journey, studying Hollywood China film collaborations like Karate Kid 3, I don't know, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, The Great Wall, I don't know if you guys know that one, features Matt Damon. These are all films that, you know, allowed me to understand, when dissecting the collaborative relationship between Hollywood and China, East and West, what are the barriers to communication? What are the barriers and cultural differences that are at play? And this really, honestly, informs my whole life's trajectory today. And so today I, you know, continue to engage in something I'm super passionate about, which is promoting mutual understanding and cultural understanding through the work that I do at Airbnb, which is in several ways. I started off as a community organizer, being tapped to lead Asian Pacific Islander outreach in San Francisco, considering San Francisco is like 30% API. I was very honored and happy to be able to engage in my multifaceted identity that way, and to also provide value to Airbnb doing that. Since then, I moved on to digital organizing, which kind of is less so of that, you know, personal relationships on the ground in the community. However, I've taken, you know, the organizing internally as well, and our ERG space to oversee our Asians Employee Resource Group globally, where I could continue to engage with my identity every day in a way that makes me feel belonging at its best, really. So I couldn't be happier to do this in my daily work. I already talked about the Fulbright stuff. segueing into my hobbies and passions real quick. I love arts and crafts. I do a lot of yoga lately with the SIP. I try to be creative, so I would go to the public lawn and kind of set up shop there. It's kind of nice. It's kind of like hot yoga because it's really hot, but like, you know, not with the actual heater. Comedy show's my thing. I love to laugh. Cooking. The first thing I want to do after SIP is probably go to a tropical area island and just like MIA for a week, digital detox at the least. Favorite quote, be yourself, everyone else is already taken, really speaks a lot to me. It really speaks to the fact that, you know, everyone has value and different experiences that shapes the value add in the community. And if we all recognize that, we can be the best we can to then contribute back to the community, do good. So that is a quick summary of who I am. Switching slides to Asians Employee Resource Group, our Airfinity program, Airbnb. Awesome, thank you. So our Airbnb program is not the newest, but also not the oldest. So we have 19 employee resource groups with over 100 chapters globally, which is so good to see. And we truly see them as critical to our company's ability to achieve our mission, which is to create a world where anyone feels like they could belong anywhere. That is the foundation and core to how we function. As you know, as a platform you all may be familiar with, we provide listings, places for folks to live, connect, you know, strangers to strangers. And so that trust factor is really important. And to make sure that we're able to encourage people to be comfortable meeting others, let alone living with others. We have to make sure that we do walk the talk, walk the walk with diversity and belonging internal to Airbnb as well as external to Airbnb. We've grown since, but this is the core of our mission, and we prioritize that when it comes to trying to, you know, see how we can further grow our company as well, so that it coincides with each other. So some basic core principles of our Airfinity program. I forget to mention that I come in to represent our Asians Employee Resource Group, so I'm really just spitting out things that I think our D&I team would do a lot better talking about, but I'm gonna take a stab. First and foremost, we want to create a safe space. We talked about this, Tanya, Steph, we mentioned about, you know, the importance of having a place where people could get together and share amongst ourselves and really talk about our identity and reflect and process, especially during this time. We also prioritize personal and professional growth. At the end of the day, we want our employees to feel like they could be themselves at work so that they could stay with the company and continue to, be able to add value in however we can, so that we can continue to grow our company in a way that's robust and also helpful to long-term interests of our community as well. And so we definitely want to prioritize growth in this aspect. We also want to make sure that, you know, our candidates are diverse, right? I think we can't overemphasize how important our team is diverse, in the sense that kind of like toolbox analogy, where, you know, the more mindset, different perspectives you put in the room, the more you're able to kind of find those blind spots and then come together as one and resolve issues more effectively. And finally, building our business of belonging anywhere. That's really referring to our community impact and social impact as well. We want to be able to grow in a way that's respective of all communities the best we can, in the capacity that we can. And so however we could leverage our ERGs to be able to provide that type of expertise is very ideal. Finally, segueing back to our employee resource group, Asians at ERG group, you know, like the way a lot of our ERGs function, we look at the core principles, but we also try to tailor it to our own needs, which is totally appropriate, right? Because every community, while we share a common cause of, you know, finding our voice, trying to advocate for our voice and building community, we want to recognize that each community has our own unique challenges as well. And for the Asians at Employee Resource Group, we want to be able to, first of all, elevate our stories. Speaking up is not easy to do. It's not easy to do, period. But for the APEC community, I want to say that's a little bit of a threshold due to cultural kind of differences there, factors at play. And so we want to find ways to continue to elevate our stories as Asian Pacific Islander group that is both, together as one, but also recognizing that we are not monolithic. We are not all the same. And so we want to be able to celebrate those nuances. And second one, to elevate our strengths, which really speaks to the personal and professional development pillar. You guys may have heard of the bamboo ceiling term being tossed around. And, that's really referring to how different cultural differences could either undermine or advance our ability to move up the ladder, move across the ladder, just grow in general in the way that is necessary for us professionally and personally. And so we want to find ways to elevate our strengths, talk about what our value add is, and celebrate it. And so that comes with a lot of professional development programs. And then lastly, that speaks to, I think, kind of like number 4 of building our business to belong anywhere, is that we want to elevate our community. We can't stress enough how important that, while we are advocating for the APEC community at Airbnb, we want to be able to also advocate for community outside of Airbnb, as well as other marginalized communities. And so, through different ways, through social impact initiatives, volunteer donation programs, we try to find a way to give back as well, recognizing that, as a young millennial, myself, I'm speaking to, we do have a certain privilege working in these at Airbnb, and so we want to be able to give back in the capacity that we can. So that pretty much sums up our ERG landscape, and looking forward to hearing from others as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mabel and Buck. We'll hand it over to Buck.
Sounds good. Hey, everyone. Buck Dossie. I'm in solution consulting at Adobe, and my role is to be the technological specialist during sales cycles. You may notice that I'm not from a diversity or inclusion role, but I feel it's extremely important. And I also feel a moral obligation to do everything that I can to use the resources that I have, the attention that I have, to bring attention and enablement to those who are like myself that want to help others but don't know how. So a little bit about me. I'm from an agency background. I spent some time working at a publisher, managing media campaigns, went into ad technology, and currently in marketing technology at Adobe. A few years ago, when Me Too happened, that was an epiphany for me. The energy that came from that opened my eyes and helped me realize that, I can't sit on the sidelines. And so, in addition to today, as well as a lot of the writing that I do and my work on Twitter, my goal is to bring attention to those who need help and to educate others who have the power to help others realize that power and execute. Now, my background is also pretty crazy. I was a pretty terrible college student, but I did spend a lot of time doing student groups. I was a cheerleader in college, and can take credit for causing a basketball game to go to commercial break, which is a fun story I can talk about later. But I'm also a dad. I'm a drummer, and I would say most importantly, and this is sort of my philosophy on life, is something that speaks to my faith, in that everything that I've been given, I feel like is for a purpose. I'm extremely blessed with my family and all of my life experience, and my goal is to leverage that to help others. And so I included this quote from the Bible to kind of represent that. So that said, we can move on to Adobe's perspective on ERGs. And as an employee that's not in HR, or clearly I'm not in an underrepresented group, I wanted to make sure that I'm communicating that at Adobe, everyone is a part of helping the community. We're actively encouraged to play a role in making our not only our company, but also the world a better place. Our larger diversity movement is called Adobe for All. And it's really about pulling together the differences that we all have into a collaborative and cooperative effort, not only together as employees, but also as a company, right? We're one of the first to take a leadership role in fair pay and gender equality, as well as building communities, such as community programs like Communities at Adobe. We want to make sure that everyone feels included, because when they do, they can do their best, right? And when they do their best, we all win. At Adobe, we have 7 different employee networks, and each of those is divided into many, many different local chapters. So far, we have 229 local chapters, but that grows almost every single day. And with that, Tanya, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So thank you, first of all, for introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit about who you are and why this meaning diversity and inclusion personally matters to you, and for really giving us a peek behind the curtain into each of your organizations, 3 very different organizations, so we can understand what employee resource groups look in this landscape. So Ben, if we go to the next slide, we have been polling diversity and inclusion leaders from all around the world to really try to narrow down the list of burning questions. And so we've come up with a few questions we want to throw out to our panelists now to dive into and share our own stories and perspectives. And then we're going to hand it over to you, the participants, to ask your burning questions. So I can lead us into the discussion, and we can we can drop the slide share. So the first question, and I'm going to ask Steph, you just kick off with this one, okay? Heads up. So what's one action that your ERGs are taking right now to drive diversity and inclusion momentum? And what role can ERG leaders and allies specifically play in ecosystems today? Stephanie, can you kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. And as I think of that, I probably don't have one action, but I'll try to talk really quickly to kind of give you a few other actions, shall I say. Given everything that's going and happening around the world, I would say our Black employee network has really stepped up with regards to being available, and our leadership. I mean, just this past weekend, our leadership has been reaching out to our Black employee network to have discussions to check in on our Black employees. And one action that they're doing right now is currently we're having a town hall. We're having a town hall for our Black employee network group and our employees in general in North America to share stories, to take time to reflect, and to create action. I think our ERGs are more than just the celebration piece. And I think ERGs still need to be celebrating, because we have to have our celebrations and celebrate each other, but they really drive that business. Another thing I will sort of share, and this came with our Business Women's Network, which is our largest ERG, and our Pride group. They came together, and I mean, with the COVID-19, CBC ran an article a few weeks ago around domestic violence and how that has increased by 20 to 30%. And what our BWN and our Pride did is they created a 1 or 2 pager for our employees if in that situation, and what to do. And so immediately we had, some articles, some resources, and great to see how our ERGs are coming together. And I will say also just one other little action too is around, just in general with COVID-19, the community calls. So our BWN, we're having our Business Women's Network, we're doing weekly community calls on different topics. Again, just to have a sort of check in and see how people are doing. The comment then, or the question around the second about the ERG leaders and our allies, I think our ERG leaders they're seen as our trusted advisors. They're hearing from employees and they're sharing with our leaders. and allies, to sort of separate that out, I think our allies are really there on an ally journey, as I consider myself or trying to be an ally. I don't want to call myself an ally because, unless somebody else from another group calls me an ally, then I'm an ally, but I'm trying to be an ally. And so as an ally, I'm always learning and listening. So, and I think that's, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And what we're really hearing is leaders, we're all leaders, and we get the chance to role model what that looks like, what allyship looks like, what learning and listening. There's so many different channels that we can take to do that, whether it's a town hall or weekly, connects. There's ways we can come together. Thank you for sharing that. One of the other questions we had was, how can ERGs affect business priorities and goals? Now that we are working in a work from home environment, and you mentioned something when you were speaking, Stephanie, about employee resource groups. Sometimes early in our journey, we can be seen as hobby groups. How do we make that shift to business priority groups and business impact groups? So Mabel, can you kick us off here and share a little bit more about how ERGs can make that shift and link into business priorities and goals?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tanya. I know that this is actually something that I think a lot of us are itching to know as well, because we know that when navigating the diversity and inclusion space, the question oftentimes is, how do we make it sustainable, and how do we make sure that we continue to build off of a momentum in which it is a priority, right, in the company. And so with that, it's funny because ironically, I feel like what my role in the beginning as a community organizer doing API outreach in San Francisco, even though I wasn't exactly leading Asians Employee Resource Group then, was a very good example to showcase how business priorities and diversity priorities could come together as one and really make an impact in both the company as well as the community itself. So I guess a fun fact, I got hired at Airbnb because one of the reasons I would like to say it's because I could speak Cantonese out of all languages, Cantonese, Chinese, right? And that's, as I mentioned earlier, is because San Francisco is like 30% API and like 25% Cantonese speaking Chinese Americans. And so we saw the value, the team saw the value in having someone who has the cultural advantage here, strengths here, to be able to navigate the space to help the company as well as the community long term. And so when I was tapped, it was quite the journey, because I had no idea what it meant to navigate the DNI space. I had no idea what it meant to advocate for more resources or for partnerships in general. And it was just thrown in this mix of huge confusion and frustrations, liaisoning between the company and the external community. As I hear from the community, they're like, well, we need help with this and this and this. So I go back to the company and I'm like, this is what the community is saying. And they're like, no, we can't do this. Like, none of it, I'll be super blunt here. And it's because there's a lack of understanding of both parties in terms of what works and what doesn't, and what the gaps are. And so my role was really to, be an intermediary. At the end of the day, in terms of business outcomes, there are two that I could point to that really highlighted the impact in companies leveraging cultural expertise and leaning on ERG groups to make it so that it's win-win for all. Number one is, I don't know if you guys know about Airbnb experiences by now. You guys heard of that? Yeah. Airbnb experiences are essentially, tailored, curated activities led by local experts. And we prioritize authenticity and cultural expertise and hospitality at the end of the day. And so with Airbnb Experience launched several years ago, I remember when we launched in San Francisco, I just started at Airbnb, and I remember they put on an immediate meeting, and I was just kind of like, okay, what's going on? And the whole meeting was having a conversation about, okay, so we have quite a few experiences in San Francisco launch right now. This is our home base, so this is very important that we do this right. You don't exactly have an Asian Pacific Islander experience though, and concerning San Francisco's like 30% API, this just doesn't make sense. You know, like we have to, our supply has to meet or represent well of the community we're coming from. And in that moment, I was just kind of like, interesting. And then very soon after, I was being tapped and pulled in to help recruit for Airbnb experience, when that's not really my role, right? My role is in public policy. I do policy work, not business work. But I was looped into business work, and I was just kind of like, oh, scratching my head. I was like, oh no, like I felt like I had to get this done. Needless to say, it was kind of stressful for me because I just started. But then at the same time, when I was able to understand the need here and feel really valued as someone who could make this happen through the connections piece, through the community awareness, that, you know, I realized that there's a lot that ERGs can really do. And in that moment, I was just kind of like, well, I hadn't really known about agents at then, but I could totally see the company going to our agents and employee resource group and saying, look, we kind of need help. Can you help us? So
yeah, you're touching on something. I hear really two things that you're saying, Mabel. Number one, we can harness diversity as a strength, right? And number two is tapping into our employee resource groups to reach our customers, to better relate to them, to uncover new business needs, and recognize that we have pockets of our ideal customer groups that live within our organizations in our employees. So thank you for really, you know, double clicking and sharing from a personal perspective how you've done that and how your journey within Airbnb is a perfect example of how we can leverage our ERGs. That's awesome. Thank you.
Good recap.
Yeah, I've been listening, taking good notes. I also just want to take a moment here to pause because I know Stephanie had mentioned SAP has a town hall going on right now with their Black Employee Resource Group, and it's something, there's an important conversation happening. So I just want to take a moment to honor that and to know that she may have to jump off. And for everyone who's on our call today, you can reach out to Steph via LinkedIn. You can send us any questions. She's happy to respond via email as well. But I wanted to pause and know and just acknowledge the fact that there's a lot going on right now. And again, honor our presence today and know that we will all stay connected as a community moving forward. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks so much.
And our last kind of prepared question before we go to open Q&A, so start drumming up those questions, all the participants, what are the questions that have been whirling around in your head that you are just can't wait to ask these panelists? You know, one of the questions we had come up with was intersectionality. When we look at all the roles that we're playing right now, especially in this work from home environment, how do we give ourselves permission to bring all of who we are into the workplace, especially now when business and personal life have never been so integrated? So, you know, how do we give ourselves permission, and then leading into what does the future look like, and what do ERGs of the future look like? So I'm going to hand over to you, Buck. Can you kick us off with diving into this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Adobe, they've had, or we've had a really interesting approach to solving this particular challenge, and it's really been in the framework of how Adobe is supporting employees of all types throughout the world, and specifically how Adobe is engaging with the employees that are in the ERGs. Specifically, and as of lately, our Black employee network has been very active, right? And you see the first of the two needs that I'll highlight, and that is for a need for connection, right? To understand what everyone in your resource group is going through. But that's also created a challenge, right? Because this is our current status and situation with you know, all of the tension that exists that frankly many of the folks like me had no idea was as large of a problem as it is. It's created a challenge in that how do we participate in the solution? And with that question, we found, I don't want to use the word pollution, but noise in our ERGs, in that many of the allies have been asking for ways to help in our ERG groups. And because of that, it's oftentimes created situations where maybe some of the comments are not appropriate for that group. And we've had to reassess where are we going to handle these conversations. And so recently we created a new home for allies, where allies can organize, can discuss the relevant issues, and ask for ways that they can help. And so this has played an immediate role in cleaning up the discussion and the content that happens in especially our Black Employee Network, but also has provided an outlet for everyone to express how they're feeling, to hear how others are feeling, and to find ways to ultimately contribute. And so once you solve for that need, it becomes much easier to assess what you can actually do for your work. I know there are many distractions that that many of us have never had to deal with. I have worked from home for many years, almost a decade. I have worked from home for 10 weeks with a child at home. And that's a very, very new challenge and something that, as a parent, you are always questioning yourself whether or not, I can work. Should I work? Is it fair, not only to my job, but also to my family? And so the second component here is that Adobe has been very, very supportive of understanding the increased load that specifically parents are feeling. And so you've seen the seamless integration between mental and physical well-being play out on a weekly basis. We see programs like flexible schedules. We also have a new COVID time off program that grants employees 20 days of additional leave if they become a victim to the COVID virus, if someone in their family falls victim and they need to take care of them, or if you're struggling with the stress and the mental load. That's also a qualifier. And so that plus our employee assistance program is very, very proactive about offering assistance for mental health from putting you on the phone with Teladoc or any of the other healthcare providers. This transition to working from home has been one that has needed support and solutions from multiple angles, and we're definitely seeing a very strong leadership position from our Adobe diversity and employee experience teams, which I'm very thankful for.
Thank you so much, Buck. I love how you were talking about the home for allies. And that really leads us, from diversity to the inclusion part. What does inclusion look like? And double clicking on the role that ERGs can play right now with the conversations and the tensions and knowing which channel to use when. Sometimes it's a group discussion, sometimes it's a one-on-one, but knowing that both of those actions, they matter. And thanks for really sharing from a COVID-19 perspective some of the policy changes and what flexibility and leaning into mental health and acknowledging the stresses of having multiple roles and realizing that there's intersectionality with each and every one of us of how we show up. Some of us are wearing so many different jackets right now. How do we give ourselves permission to not be 100% when we're wearing all of those jackets, or to choose one for the next 15 minutes to lean into and then to take off, So I really hear that permission. And it's really inspiring to hear how Adobe is creating policies to support that permission. So now it's time, participants, where we hand the mic over to you. We've got some fantastic diversity and inclusion experts, not only in our panel, but within this community. So what are your burning questions? Feel free to come off mute to ask your question, or if you like, you can put it in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. Hi, Toki, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I clicked on something and now I can't put my hand down, so I might as well talk. The question is, in your organizations, how do you reconcile the goals of DEI with the advocates versus your activists?
Mabel, do you want to take that? I think Steph may have dropped off.
I want to better understand that question. what is the difference in your point of view, Toki? That's a great
From my
question.
point of view, for example, an advocate is somebody who will, take a step back, let others speak, get involved in the background, but not necessarily step up. Whereas activists are people who are more in the forefront, taking the lead. They become, I guess, the thought leaders in certain situations. And I've seen organizations kind of struggling with managing to keep both, because everyone's they line up behind the same pillars and objectives that are aligned with corporate goals, but then all of a sudden something happens and then two voices kind of take over and people are going in different directions. How do you reel everybody in? Well,
That's a
first of all, do you have advocates and activists in your organization, and how do you reel them in?
That's a great question. It's a dilemma that I think you're right, very hard to reconcile. I could speak from an ERG perspective. We're very much the activists oftentimes in the field because we are, you know, we do have expertise in the community that we are trying to represent. And so for Asians App, for example, as a lead, oftentimes what I'm hearing from our members speak to a lot of the unique challenges that our communities face that may not be fully understood by folks who may not be in the community. And these issues are not easy to communicate as well. And so oftentimes it is a struggle for us to be able to advocate for ourselves, and also bridge that a gap of understanding with who we see our advocates or our allies. And it takes a lot of persistent conversations to be had, and really candid and hard conversations to be had, to be able to bridge that type of gap. So I do see advocates and activists working alongside each other, and it could be very fruitful, right? I do see our diversity and belonging department space, in which several of us here today and the speakers represent as well as advocates. I think they have a unique position to be able to have a bird's eye view of where all the voices fits in the community of kind of diversity and belonging, and how do you elevate all communities in a way that's fair and also inclusive, right, within the DNB space. And I know that is also very much a challenge as well. But then again, I really emphasize on having those candid conversations across ERGs, across, with the diversity, of course, diversity belonging space as well as ERGs, but just like, even with our peers about this and our managers about this, managers can be our advocates as well, and activists, but at the end of the day, we want to be able to have these conversations, feel comfortable having these conversations all across the board to be able to move the needle on diversity and inclusion in general. So good question. I hope that was helpful.
Thanks for the answer.
Can I add something to that? I feel like two things. Number one, when I think of allyship, I think of asking, listening and learning, showing up, and standing up. So it's almost like within that context of allyship, standing up is part of it. It's leaning more into advocacy, sometimes leaning into activism, whatever that looks like for us personally. So under that broad banner of allyship, I wonder where those other terms really, if they can fall under that larger umbrella. But I think the other thing, what I'm noticing in the employee resource group that we work really closely with and within our leadership council is that as an employee resource group, you need to understand with such clarity your mission, the reason why you exist. Because when you understand what your North Star is, when you're clear on what is the change that you want to make in your organization, in your team, and in your community at large, all the activities that you do, how you spend your volunteer hours, your budget, your time, your energy, it's going to be focused towards driving that change. So I think clarity in your mission and that vision is so important. And to have everyone who's part of your ERG, the members, the executive sponsor, your community partners, everyone's got to understand that, then you know you're driving in the same direction and you kind of avoid people going in different directions.
Yeah, definitely. And what I can add from the Adobe side is that engagement from the diversity and inclusion team is absolutely paramount. They have to be very involved in the Slack boards, guiding the conversations, doing exactly what Mabel said, and having candid conversations with people who are enthusiastic but may not be doing it the right way, for example, and having offline conversations to redirect that energy. But at the end of the day, to your point, everyone wants to row in the same direction. They just may not do it at the same pace or exactly in the same direction. So it's a matter of communication and alignment. And if you find that your activists are sort of disrupting the conversation where your advocates are, really engaged, there might be a better forum, right, to customize their engagement, right? Maybe there's a better place for them to that's closely related but a little bit separate, where you can kind of guide that energy a little bit more effectively.
Thank you so much. We've got time for one more question before we wrap up today. So who would like to take the mic? Or in the chat box. There's less pressure there. Any last questions or comments? You want to share a learning that something you're walking away with?
Quiet group.
Well, one of the things that has come up, we do get a lot of questions about, is how do we keep those executive sponsors and keep that buy-in at a senior level, especially now with so many things going on and priorities shifting to sometimes keep the business alive? Have we lost steam on the D&I side with some of the initiatives and the momentum? And how do we keep our leaders engaged and supporting so that we can continue to drive our goals forward? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I do. I can go first. One of the challenges we have is actually the opposite, right? We have 7 employee networks, but that means 7 VPs, right, that are aligned to them. And we have more VPs that want to contribute than we have employee networks. And so the question is, if I'm a VP and I'm not aligned to this, but I want to help, what's the right way for me to get engaged? And to be candid, we don't have a good answer for them right now. And it's something that we're dealing with and planning for. But as far as the existing employee network sponsors, we have regular communications and meetings where they have to report to both our diversity and inclusion leads as well as leadership at our company, right? So they're accountable to understand what's happening in their employee network and communicate that message upward. So it's really, we haven't had any challenges with keeping them engaged, but there's definitely accountability built in.
I love that word, accountability.
Thanks, Buck. That was helpful from an ERG perspective, and also, admittedly, also figuring out how to navigate the e-sponsorship and how do we kind of best partner with our leaders to advocate for diversity and belonging at Airbnb. From the Asians at Airbnb side of things, I would say that access is key when it comes to having an effective outcome when engaging with our e-sponsors. So at the bare minimum, I would say we have to have a channel with our e-sponsors to be able to express concerns at any time. Then it takes a lot of fruitful conversations to move forward. The other thing is that when we do have this access, it's super helpful to be able to continue to lean on our e-sponsors for strategy and different approaches in terms of what makes sense with voicing and when, right? Like we all come from good intent, but good intent does not necessarily equate to good impact. And timing and opportunity is also a huge factor at play here as well. And so we want to be mindful when we're voicing and advocating for concerns, but also, we have to also speak up. And so it's very much about, as much as we can work closely with our leaders to be able to get a better understanding of both from the leadership side of things, what does the Asian Pacific Islander community at Airbnb, like what are we concerned about? What can be done to support the community during this time? And then from the other end, the e-sponsor end, for them, for our end, for us to understand what are the e-sponsor grappling with in terms of what the community and the company is doing and moving. And, Airbnb, we just laid off like 25% of our employees just like a couple weeks ago. It's heartbreaking. And even then, I would say, even though we have been going through a financial crisis, it's been so good to see, honestly, the fact that agents at Airbnb, our ERG space, our DNI space is still very much alive. It's still very much alive. And that's what I kind of know, overcoming that period of time in which we were all very, overwhelmed, that, the DNI priority is truly is a priority within Airbnb. And so recognizing that has been bit of a highlight over the past months, which has been wild.
Yeah, to see that level of engagement. And I love what you're saying there, Mabel, about intention and impact being two very different things. And Buck, saying that you have VPs who are putting up their hands so far, and so many of them, you're trying to figure out how to allocate them or to best utilize them as resources. So I want to say huge thank you to all of our panelists, and huge thank you to everyone who has come and participated today. To close off, I'm going to hand it back to Rudolf to give some closing remarks and close up our webinar today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Mabel and Buck, and of course, Stephanie, who had to log off, and all the lovely participants. I mean, please do give us your feedback. I mean, follow us on social media, and we're happy to send you the recording after this. Thank you so much. Stay safe, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Runa.
So, I love all the goodness. I'm just reading the chat box here too. Great. So some great feedback we're getting, great ideas. These are amazing speakers today, great ideas and conversation. Really appreciate everyone's organization and contribution. Thank you. This was a really meaningful webinar in ERG. Thank you everyone for your insights. Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much everyone for joining, and it was awesome.